Hello, boys and girls. We're so glad you could join us today. I'm Master Gardener Nancy.
And I'm Master Gardener Susan. So we wanted today to give you an idea of who a Tulsa Master Gardener is. And Nancy and I are in the same class. Like, you'll have a date when you graduate from high school. You'll be the class of 2025, something like that. Nancy and I are the class of 2014. So we started, and what we found is we had a love of gardening, but wanted to get more knowledgeable about it. And both of us independently found Oklahoma State University. Some of you may have been in Stillwater. This is the main campus, and they are the group that sponsors Tulsa County. Now, when they sponsor, they don't do it on the campus, even though that's where the research is done and the formal teaching. They have what's called an extension service, and we have an extension office right here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I bet some of you have seen it. It's on the fairgrounds, and if you drive down 15th Street to go to the fair, look for this sign, OSU Cooperative Extension Service, Tulsa County. What that group did, and sponsored by the professors at OSU, they came and they taught Nancy and me over about a year. We went to classes all fall, and then we started being interns where we would practice with an experienced master gardener. I am so proud that we did that. So we are the class of 2014. While I learned quite a bit, and Nancy did too,
Yes.
that's not where it stopped. The reason why OSU would train us is that we are charged with the responsibility of going out throughout Tulsa County for many different people. One of those groups, however, are school-age children. And so when we talk about our extension service, OSU extended their knowledge to us at the extension office, and we are responsible for extending it to you as school children. So what we came up with our program for in the classroom, we decided to call it MAGIC. Now, we didn't just make up that name. It stands for Master, M-A, Gardeners, G, in the classroom. We like to say we bring magic to your classrooms. And doing that, we have a mission statement that is always in our mind. That is that MAGIC provides high quality science education to schools in Tulsa County, grades K, kindergartner, through 5th grade. Now, as we bring that knowledge to you, we also have some objectives for you to learn. And today, we are going to be talking about plants and how they sprout, and that sprouting activity is called germination. So we are going to learn what a seed needs to germinate, the different stages of a sprouting seed, and here's two big new words, the difference between a monocotyledon and a dicotyledon. We're just going to shorten, kind of nickname them to be monocots and dicots. So to start us off, Nancy, I think you brought a book that we might read.
I did bring a book. It's called One Bean, just like the cover there. And I'm going to read you a story about some children that planted a bean seed. So I had one bean. It was dry and smooth and hard. I put it on a wet paper towel and I covered it with another wet towel and soon its skin turned all wrinkly.
Kind of like fingers in the bathtub.
Right, because it absorbed the moisture. My bean got fatter too. I think it got too fat for its skin because the skin split. This meant it was time to plant my bean. I filled a paper cup with black potting soil. Then I laid my fat, wrinkly bean in the cup and covered it with soil. I watered it when the soil was dry. So I would touch the soil. If it was dry, I would give it some water. Even though I couldn't see my bean hidden under the damp, black soil, I watched it every day. Then one day, just like the story of Jack and the Beanstalk, something wonderful happened. A greenish-white stalk poked up from the soil. My bean was dangling from the end of it, and things were happening down here that we'll see later. 2 leaves soon grew on my bean plant, and these were shaped like Valentine hearts. These were the seed coats, and then the leaves came out too. So this was a dicot. More green heart-shaped leaves sprouted. And here we can see in this picture the roots that are also happening down below the soil, because this needs to strengthen the plant so it can get taller. My bean plant grew bigger and bigger, and it needed a bigger place to grow. I filled a flower pot with potting soil very gently, very carefully. I took my bean with its bright green leaves and roots spreading through the black moist soil out of the paper cup. I planted it in the flower pot where it could stay. Sunshine shone on it and made my plant grow some more, so I had it in the window. One day I saw little green bumps on my bean plant. Those little green bumps were buds. The buds burst open and lots of white flowers blossomed among the green leaves. When the white flowers fell off, tiny bean pods hung in their place. See how small they are? Before long, there were lots of bean pods growing on my beautiful bean plant. Those tiny bean pods grew bigger, and one day I picked one. I split it open, and I looked inside, and what do you think I saw? I saw smooth, shiny beans, just like the bean that had started it all. I picked a few pods and ate the beans inside, and they were very good. The end.
Well, that was a fun story, and I think someone kind of made it up. We're going to be doing something like that, but I want to tell you a real story. And this is one from a scientist from Washington, D.C. It's about lotus seeds. So I'm going to read my notes. Here's a picture as I'm reading, and I'll move on and maybe, there it is. There's the picture. So once there was a beautiful lake in China. In its waters grew the sacred lotus plant. Each year, seeds from the lotus flower up there fell into the water and sank to the muddy bottom. Over many years, though, just with global warming, the lake dried up. the lotus seeds, which were very hard and covered with a tough outer skin, stayed buried in that dry lake bed. Many years passed. The land that had once been a lake was now used for farming. A scientist from America came and began to dig in the farmland, for he was interested in its history. And you know what he found? He found some of these lotus seeds. As an experiment, he decided to try to sprout the seeds in the laboratory in Washington, D.C. He put them in a strong acid to try to dissolve that hard outer shell coat. And then he planted the seeds. He saved a few of the seeds to test by radiocarbon dating to find out just how old those seeds were. While the other seeds were in the soil, he found out that the one that he tested was over 1,000 years old.
Wow.
After learning that news, he doubted that he would ever get any of the other seeds to germinate, but he left them in the soil. Then one morning in June of 1952, almost 70 years ago, a tiny sprout poked up through the soil. The 1,000-year-old seed had sprouted and germinated. And you know what? Today, the next generations of those early seeds are still growing in the Kenilworth Gardens of Washington, D.C. So if you're there visiting, you might look for those lotus seeds, and you know they came from a seed over 1,000 years old. Now, not every seed can, live for 1,000 years, but we're going to talk about what other seeds need to germinate. Germination is a big word. It's one that I hope you'll learn. It defines the seed from when it begins to swell until when the first leaves appear. So you can see these, like in the bean story, they put them on a wet towel, and you can see things that are happening there. So talking about what needs to happen in order to have germination, let's see some of those things. They have to have water. Remember, he made it a wet towel.
True.
They have to have air. They have to have the proper temperature. Some people might think, well, it has to be hot enough. What a seed needs is a change in temperature, and that's its signal that it's time to germinate. Now, some seeds also need sunlight. Some seeds need darkness, or even some need fire or smoke to germinate. A lot of different conditions. The question then becomes, does a plant need the same conditions to keep growing? And the answer is yes, it needs water, it needs air, the proper temperature, and something new. It needs to keep growing, needs light from the sun, nutrients from the soil, and just time and space to grow.
I'm going to tell you about the two main kinds of flowering plants. One is called a monocot. Remember, that was our short name for monocotyledon. And it has one seed leaf that's long and thin, and the veins in it are parallel. The other kind of flowering plant is a dicot, which was our short name for dicotyledon, and di means two. So it has two seed leaves. And we're going to talk about a little bit of the difference between the root systems as well. This root system has a main root with little small roots coming off of it, and this one starts expanding right away, and the roots have to get big enough to hold the plant that comes out. So this shows a close-up of the dicot leaf, and the leaf on a dicot has a main leaf, a main vein with veins coming out from it, and the leaf is wider. This is the leaf of a monocot, and it has veins that run parallel to the main vein. So let's look at a monocot seed. This is like the seed we planted, only we planted a dicot in the book. So this is a monocot, one embryo inside, and it has a hard seed coat.
So I have a question. What is an embryo?
An embryo is a tiny, tiny plant that's going to grow into a bigger plant. And
So, kind of like a baby.
kind of like a baby.
Okay.
Right. Thank you for asking. So this inside the hard seed coat is called the endosperm, and it's the food source for the embryo until the embryo plant can grow enough to come outside and get its energy. And it has one cotyledon, which is like a bigger leaf or a littler coat inside here, and we'll see that when it starts to grow. So when the monocotyledon germinates, first we have the seed inside the soil, and the very first thing it does is start sending down its roots. It also sends up the one tiny leaf, but you don't see these right away unless it's in a cup where you can see through it. But we do see the one leaf coming up, and then we get more leaves that join the plant, and they're all long and thin with the parallel veins. And here we have the many roots that are trying to hold to the soil and make this plant strong. So corn is a monocot that you are familiar with, and see the long skinny leaves that have parallel veins. And then this is the vegetable that results from the corn. Other examples of monocots are irises,
Daffodils?
daffodils, yes, I think they're daffodils, grasses, even the grass in your yard. Now we're going to look at a dicot. That was like the example that was in the book of the bean. So it also has an embryo inside of it and a coat on the outside and a food source inside for the embryo until it comes out and can get the sunshine that it needs. When a dicotyledon or dicot germinates, the seed coat breaks and starts poking up a little bit, and the primary root comes down here and other roots grow off of that primary root. The cotyledon, or the first leaves that you see, come up through the ground as well, but then it gets its first two leaves, two of them, and those were the heart-shaped leaves that we saw in the book. And the cotyledon, which brought the embryo out of the ground, just withers and falls off.
That's a pretty one.
An example of a dicot is mint. You can see the main vein and the other veins branching off from the main vein. Beautiful color. Other examples of a dicot would be apple trees, other fruit trees, bean plants, just like we saw in the book. Now, we're going to do a puzzle. We're going to try and figure out the order of what happens to a seed. And we're going to put it in order just like an alphabet, ABC, or numbers 1, 2, 3. We have 2 puzzles here.
So the first one we're going to do is that the corn seed?
This is the corn seed, which is a monocot.
Okay.
Okay.
So what do we do?
We're going to try and figure out what should be the first picture when we first put the corn seed in the soil. But we might have a problem here because it appears that these have the sun at the top and these have the sun at the bottom. And I think that I have to make sure everything has the sun at the top
That
and
helps
the soil.
me some. So we should make everything kind of go this way. So that's the
Right.
first step. That's kind of like when you do a puzzle, you get all the straight edges first.
Absolutely.
Okay, got it.
Absolutely. Now, the seed didn't look like either of these two when we started, did it?
No, I guess that would be the first one because it's just a seed down in the dirt.
Correct. Okay. Now, the seed's under the soil, the sun's up here.
Okay.
And what happened first? I think
The root.
Yes,
The root
we
comes
need
out.
something to support this plant. Now, the root doesn't just boom come out right away and looking like this. So I think this might
That's
be
the
the
next
next
one. Okay. Oh, look, I think we're already in that's got to be the order.
Well, this is the order until it starts coming out of the ground. But what about these two?
Oh, yeah.
I think first we just
Just
see
a little.
one leaf, and then we get more leaves and more roots.
So this would be first when we plant it, then it's doing things we can't see,
Right?
and then we start to see a little bit more, and then the plant.
Absolutely.
Oh, good. I think we
Perfect.
did that one. You said you have another one?
I do have another one. This was the monocot, so now we're going to look at the dicot, like the
Okay.
bean plant. Now we should be real familiar with this because this was in the book.
Well, I see the first step we do, of course, get the sun up in the sky.
That would be a good idea. Okay? There we go. Now, what did the bean seed look like when we first put it in the soil and it was just the seed coat that had split open but nothing was coming out yet? I
Well,
think this
I
might
think
be
that
the
one,
one. So
yeah.
I'm just going to put it here for right now. Okay. Next, do we see a plant right away?
No, we
No.
see more roots.
We see more roots coming out. Do you see a plant right away now? No. I think we see more
Those-
roots growing down and spreading
Okay.
out
So this is going someplace else.
someplace else.
Well, then that one is just the big brother of this one, so it goes
Right.
next.
Very good. Okay. Now, do we see the full plant right away?
Nope.
No, we have to see the cotyledons and the first 2 true leaves that grow out. And then we get to see the true leaves, 2 true leaves, and the cotyledons that are going to dry up and fall off.
Well, that helps me because I wanted to actually do an experiment.
That would be
And
fabulous.
I have some things, you know, when we couldn't see the roots,
Right.
let me show you what I brought. And for those of you watching, you could remember this and do this at your home or at your childcare where you are. First thing for my experiment, I just got a plastic cup, but I don't want to drown the plant.
Correct.
So I don't know if you can see it, but I poked a hole so that extra water drains out.
Excellent.
So the next step that I'm going to do, I brought some dirt from home.
Excellent.
So this is nice
Wonderful
soft
soil.
dirt. Yeah. And I'm not going to plant it all the way to the top, but I'm going to put down about an inch below the top. So I've got my soil
And a little room, good.
and a little room. And then you can use any kind of stick that you want to. These are popsicle sticks. I need something to dig. And so we're going to dig. And then I've got some beans, just like your story.
Excellent.
So what I do with my bean, I slide the paddle down right next to the cup, and I pull it towards me, and that kind of creates a hole.
Wonderful.
And
Wonderful.
so-
And since this is a clear cup, we might be able to see this seed and see what happens.
Well, actually, I've done some of this experiment already, and I have some examples.
Oh,
Some real live
Great,
examples.
great.
They're hiding under here. Now, the first one is, I just planted this a couple of days ago. And if you look, you can start to see the root activity. So that's why we use the plastic cup, so you can really see what's going. So
that is
that's
so
the first.
helpful to be able to see what's happening underneath the soil.
Now, this one I planted 10 days ago. Look at that one.
Oh my goodness.
There's all sorts of things, and it's just barely coming up from the top. But look at all the activity going on under the soil.
That's
So-
going to be really strong to hold up that
Yeah,
plant.
it's going to be. And I show you the next one. I planted these 3 weeks ago. And look at that, their root system, they've kind of completely filled in all the dirt. This big one was the first one that came up, and it's already dropped its cotyledon. Then the one I planted a couple of days later, you can see it's a little bit shorter,
Uh-huh.
and its cotyledon is still attached
Oh,
right
look at
there.
that.
Right. And when you talk about dicots, see how they came up and 2 leaves came off, and now 2 leaves. This one is going to be a longer leaf will come off, and this one has 2 leaves. So you could try these in your home now, but remember, the one that did so good, it did so well because I gave it sun, I gave a nice warm temperature, it was in my kitchen, I watered it, but not too much, and
now this one looks like it's getting too big for its little
Yeah,
cut, so
and
you're going
now
to want to
it's
find a pot.
we'd have to go over and find a pot.
The end.